In a corporate empire secretly controlled by a Korean mafia boss, Sandra Bullock's resume is dumped in the trash, seconds before drifter-turned-genius Keanu Reeves is crowned the new CEO. But when Sandra uncovers the truth behind her rejection, the three are pulled into a deadly power game where loyalty, ambition, and survival collide. Sandra Bullock sat in the lobby of Dehan Global with her fingers locked together so tightly her knuckles were white. Her suit jacket was a size too big, borrowed from a neighbor, and the edge of one sleeve was starting to fray. She kept smoothing it down anyway, as if neat fabric could hide the late rent notices folded in her purse, the calls she'd stopped answering from the bank, the way her life had shrunk to the space between maybe and too late. The building around her looked like another planet. Walls of glass, polished floors that mirrored the ceiling lights, quiet people in expensive clothes moving with the calm of those who have never had to count coins before buying bread. Sandra's resume, 3 pages she had rewritten 20 times, rested on her lap. She had been a project manager once before the recession, before her mother got sick, before a chain of bad luck stole the ground from under her feet. This interview felt less like an opportunity and more like the last open door in a burning house. Across from her, the security desk watched everything. The guard, a young woman with tired eyes, gave Sandra a small, kind smile when their gazes met. It was the kind of smile that said, "I know you're scared. I am too." Sandra held on to that just for a second. Kindness, even a little, felt like oxygen. The elevator chimed. A man stepped out tall in a simple black suit that somehow looked sharper than all the others. His hair fell just to his shoulders, a little messy but clean, and he carried no briefcase, no folder, nothing that said he needed this place. There was something open in his face, something quiet in his eyes, as if he'd walked through storms and learned to carry his own weather. He hesitated when he saw Sandra juggling her resume, her bag, and a lukewarm paper cup of coffee. One of the pages slipped from her lap and fluttered toward the shiny floor. Before she could move, the man bent down, picked it up with both hands, and held it out like it was something fragile. "You dropped this," he said softly. "Thank you," she answered, embarrassed by the tremor in her voice. His gaze ran over the resume for half a second, not reading, just noticing the creased edges, the faint coffee stain in the corner. "Big day?" he asked. "Big enough," she tried to joke. "Maybe the biggest." He nodded like he understood that kind of weight. "Good luck, then," he said. "I hope they see what's on these pages." He stepped aside to let her pass if she wanted. Instead, she watched him walk toward the inner security gate. The guard didn't stop him. No badge, no ID, no signing in. She just pressed a button, the glass doors opened, and he went through like a man returning home. Sandra's chest tightened. Of course, he was already someone here, a consultant maybe, an executive, the kind of man who didn't have to rehearse answers to "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" because he was already there. "Sandra Bullock," a voice called. She stood up too fast. The HR assistant, nervous, efficient, a tablet in her hand, smiled politely. "The chairman will see you now." The word sent a small shock through her. The chairman. She had not expected that. Usually it was a recruiter, a middle manager, someone who could forget her within the hour. Being seen by the chairman meant either she had impressed them, or they were desperate, or both. They walked down a long corridor lined with art that probably cost more than her apartment. On the walls, framed photos of the company's founder shook hands with politicians and celebrities. In the biggest photo, a younger version of the current chairman smiled at the camera, his hand resting on the shoulder of some foreign minister. His name in sharp silver letters, Joon Park. "Is he nice?" Sandra asked before she could stop herself. The assistant paused for a heartbeat, then gave a careful answer. "He's very focused." Focused, Sandra heard what wasn't being said. She swallowed and forced her shoulders back. Courage wasn't a feeling for her anymore. It was a habit, a thing she did because the alternative was to sink. They reached the boardroom. Frosted glass, heavy wooden doors, voices inside low and calm. The assistant opened the door just a crack and slipped through, leaving Sandra alone in the hallway for a moment. Through that narrow gap, she caught a quick glimpse. A long table, dark suits. At the head, a man in his 50s with perfect hair and a watch that glinted even in the soft light. He wasn't speaking, yet somehow the whole room seemed to orbit him. Joon Park. The assistant whispered something in his ear and placed a single sheet of paper in front of him, Sandra's resume. Joon picked it up with 2 fingers as if it might stain him. His eyes skimmed it once. His mouth curled just barely. Without a word, he turned in his chair, reached behind him, and dropped her resume into a black metal trash bin by the window. Sandra's heart forgot how to beat. She had knocked on the door of his world, and he had thrown her whole life away with a tiny flick of his wrist. She turned to leave, shame burning her throat, when another door opened at the far end of the corridor. Footsteps. The same man from the lobby, the one who had picked up her resume, walked toward the boardroom, now flanked by 2 senior executives. His suit was the same, but now it looked like a uniform. Inside, the voices in the boardroom went silent. The HR assistant appeared again, her face carefully blank. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "There's been a change in the schedule. The position you applied for has just been closed." "Closed," Sandra repeated, the word thick on her tongue. "But my interview." "I really am sorry," the woman whispered, eyes flicking nervously toward the boardroom. "Please leave your contact information if something opens up." Her voice faded as the hallway filled with a different sound. Applause, muffled but unmistakable, coming from behind the closed doors. Sandra moved without thinking, stepping aside to peer through the thin slice of frosted glass where the door hadn't fully sealed. She saw Joon Park rising to his feet, that smooth, unreadable smile on his face. The man from the lobby stood at the opposite end of the table, looking uncomfortable in all the attention. "Gentlemen," Joon said, his voice carrying even through the glass, cold and polished. "Meet the new Chief Executive Officer of Dehen Global, Keanu Reeves." Sandra's empty hands tingled where her resume had been. On the other side of the glass, the man who had wished her luck was bowing slightly as the room clapped for him. And just beneath the applause, she thought she heard something else in Joon Park's tone. Ownership, threat, something dark. As their eyes almost met through that narrow strip of glass, Sandra felt the universe fold in on itself around 3 people. A tired woman with no job, a quiet man who never asked for power, and a smiling boss who had just thrown one life away and crowned another. And in that charged, breathless second, with her future sitting in a trash can behind him, Sandra suddenly knew that whatever was happening in that room was bigger and far more dangerous than a job interview. Rain had started while Sandra was still in the elevator, so when she stepped out onto the sidewalk, the city looked blurred and distant, like it belonged to someone else. People rushed past with umbrellas held high, shoes splashing through shallow puddles. She just stood there under the awning of Dehen Global, clutching her empty folder like maybe the papers would still be inside if she held it tight enough. Her mind kept replaying the tiny sound the resume had made when it fell into the trash. It was ridiculous to remember a sound like that, but she did. A soft, final thud. Years of late nights, of caring for her mother between shifts, of taking jobs beneath her pay grade just to keep the lights on, all of it landing in a metal bin behind a man with a perfect smile. The security guard from earlier stepped outside to smoke, then hesitated when she saw Sandra. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Sandra swallowed hard. "Yeah, I'll be fine," the lie scratched her throat. The guard searched her face for a second. She looked like she wanted to say something more, then dug into her pocket, pulled out a folded sticky note and pressed it into Sandra's hand. "This is a temp agency my cousin uses. They don't pay much, but they pay on time. Tell them Minji sent you." That small act of kindness hit Sandra harder than the rejection. Her eyes stung. "Thank you," she whispered. "Hey," Minji added, voice softer, "they treat people like you're disposable in there. Don't let them make you forget who you are." Sandra nodded because she couldn't trust her voice anymore. She tucked the note into her purse like it was something precious, took a deep breath, and stepped into the rain. Each cold drop felt like the world insisting she keep moving. On the bus ride home, the window glass fogged with breath and damp air. Sandra watched the city slide by in streaks of gray and neon. Her reflection stared back at her, older than she remembered, tired but still strangely upright. She remembered her mother's voice from years ago when the hospital bills first started coming in. "We don't get to choose what breaks us," her mother had said, trying to smile through pain. "We only choose how we stand back up. Promise me you'll keep standing, Sandy." Sandra had promised. Today, that promise felt heavier than any job title. Inside Dehan's top floor, the applause finally died away. The door shut, cutting off the outside world, and the energy in the boardroom shifted from celebration to calculation. "Welcome, CEO Reeves," one of the older directors said, forcing a laugh. "We look forward to your leadership." Keanu gave a short, respectful bow of his head. "Thank you," he said, voice calm but modest. "I'm still learning your world. I'll need your help." The directors liked that answer. Humble, not threatening, easy to mold, they thought. Only Joon Park watched him with a different gaze. His smile looked like hospitality, but underneath it was ownership. As the others filed out, clapping him on the shoulder, Joon stayed seated, index finger tapping slowly on the polished table. "Stay a moment, Keanu," he said. When the door closed behind the last director, the room grew strangely quiet. The air felt heavier. Keanu remained standing, hands loosely folded in front of him, posture respectful but not submissive. "You did well," Joon said. "They like you." "I'm not sure why," Keanu replied with a small, honest shrug. "I'm just a mechanic who learned how to read balance sheets." Joon chuckled. "Don't insult yourself. I didn't pull you out of that dock job in Busan for nothing." The words hung between them. Images flashed in Keanu's mind. The shipping yard at night, the sound of boots on wet concrete, the glint of knives, his younger brother cornered by men with dead eyes. Then Joon's car sliding up beside them, doors opening, voices in Korean that sounded like judgment and salvation at once. "You saved my family," Keanu said quietly. "I haven't forgotten." "And now you save mine," Joon replied. His tone was gentle, but there was steel underneath. "This company is just another side of our organization. You're the clean face, the polite voice. You sign where I tell you, you smile when I ask, that's all." "What about the numbers?" Keanu asked carefully. "The shipments." Joon's eyes hardened just a fraction. "You don't need to understand every box to carry it, do you?" Keanu held his gaze. "I don't like lies." "Then tell yourself whatever truth helps you sleep," Joon said, rising from his seat. He straightened his cuffs, his movements smooth, controlled. "You have your brother's life because of me. I have my global expansion because of you. Balance, harmony." He walked past Keanu, then paused. "And one more thing, curiosity is expensive here. Don't ask about people who aren't in the room." The warning was soft, but it landed like a blow. Keanu inclined his head again, but inside a knot tightened. An hour later, the boardroom was empty. The lights were dimmed, the city beyond the glass glowing in blue and gold. A cleaner rolled in a cart, humming under her breath as she moved from corner to corner. Keanu had returned alone, unable to shake the feeling that his life had just been neatly wrapped in silk and placed on someone else's shelf. His gaze drifted to the metal trash bin near the window. It was almost overflowing. Crumpled papers, printouts, a shredded name badge, something tugged at him. He walked over, meaning to throw away his empty coffee cup, but instead his hand brushed against a piece of paper not fully crumpled. He smoothed it out on the table. "Sandra Bullock," the top line read. He frowned, recognizing the name from somewhere just out of reach. Then it clicked, the woman in the lobby. The one whose resume he had picked up from the floor. The one who had said this might be her biggest day. His eyes moved down the page. Project manager, led restructuring during a crisis, took care of a sick parent while working full-time. Reference letter at the back. Sandra refused to falsify financial reports even when pressured. She chose integrity over job security. He read that line twice. The cleaner came closer, noticed the paper in his hand, and gave a sympathetic sound. "Interview list," she said quietly. "Chairman didn't like her, maybe too honest. He doesn't keep people like that." Keanu's jaw tightened. He folded the resume carefully, not like trash this time, but like something fragile. "Do you remember if she got another interview?" he asked. The cleaner shook her head. No, they sent her away. She hesitated, then added under her breath, people like that don't last long here, sir. People who say no. Keanu slipped the folded resume into the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his heart. He didn't know why he was doing it, only that the idea of that woman's life sitting at the bottom of a trash bin felt wrong in a way the double books and hidden shipments could not distract him from. As he stepped out into the hallway, Joon's warning still echoing in his mind, Keanu found himself thinking one stubborn thought he couldn't shake. If they could throw her away that easily, what else were they willing to destroy? And for the first time since he'd agreed to this deal, he wondered if the quiet woman from the lobby, discarded without a second thought, might be the one person who could help him break the rules of a game that seemed designed to crush people like them. By the end of that week, Sandra was standing behind a chipped counter in a 24-hour diner that smelled like old coffee and fried onions. The neon sign outside flickered between open and pen, buzzing in a tired rhythm that matched the way her thoughts moved these days, never fully shut down, never truly awake. It wasn't glamorous. Her feet hurt by noon, her back by 3, and by midnight her smile felt like something she had to hold in place with effort. But there was something honest about it. When she wiped a table clean, it stayed clean. When she poured coffee, it was really coffee, not another promise that would evaporate in a boardroom. An older woman in a worn coat sat at the corner booth, counting coins with trembling fingers. Sandra watched her silently for a moment, then walked over with the check already in her hand. "You're good," Sandra said gently. "Your soup and coffee are on the house tonight." The woman looked up, startled. I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Sandra replied, pulling a small notepad from her apron and making a show of writing something down. "You just won the 7th customer after 10 p.m. prize. Very exclusive. I'm supposed to act excited, but I'm tired." The woman blinked, then laughed, the sound rough but real. "Is that so?" "Absolutely," Sandra said. "Diner policy, I don't make the rules." The woman's eyes softened. "Thank you, dear." As Sandra walked back to the counter, her coworker Louis shook his head in quiet admiration. "You're gonna get us both fired, you know that?" he murmured. "She'll still leave a bigger tip than the guys who shout for refills," Sandra answered. "And I can live with that." Louis studied her for a moment. "You ever gonna tell me what you did before this place? Because you don't talk like someone who was born behind a counter." Sandra smiled faintly. "I used to manage projects, big ones, teams, budgets, all that. Now I manage coffee and eggs." "You don't sound bitter," he said. "I don't have time to be bitter," she replied quietly. "I'm too busy trying to keep the pieces together." Across the city, in an office that smelled of expensive leather and new carpet, Keanu was also trying to keep pieces together, numbers, faces, loyalties. His days as CEO had begun with glossy press releases and photo shoots, but underneath that surface, he had been handed 2 sets of numbers, one for the public, one for the family. He sat with the CFO, a thin man whose hands shook when he slid the hidden ledger across the desk. "These are the special accounts," the man said in a low voice. "You approve the transfers, we move the containers. That's how it's been under Mr. Park for years." "What's in the containers?" Keanu asked. The CFO's eyes flicked to the security camera in the corner, then back to the desk. "Officially, electronics, clothing, household goods. Unofficially, I don't know, and I don't want to know." "You're okay with that?" Keanu pressed. "I'm okay with my family being safe," the man said too quickly. "Everyone here is, that's how this works." Later, in Joon's private office, the view stretched across half the city. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, as Keanu laid the ledger on his desk. "Why me?" Keanu asked quietly. "You could have chosen any polished graduate from Seoul National, someone who doesn't ask questions." Joon watched the traffic lines far below. "Because polished men break too easily when they finally see blood. You've already seen it." He turned, his gaze sharp. He pulled a small photo from his drawer and set it on the desk. Keanu's breath caught. It was his younger brother, Daniel, laughing in some park, a little girl on his shoulders. Keanu hadn't even known the girl existed. "Your brother has a daughter now," Joon said calmly. Did you know they look happy? It would be a shame if anything disrupted that. Anger flared in Keanu's chest, but he kept his face still. Are you threatening my family? Not at all, Joon smiled. I'm reminding you that I protect what belongs to me. You wear the suit, you sign the papers. In return, the people you love keep breathing. That's our agreement. When Keanu finally escaped to his own office that night, the city lights felt less like stars and more like watchful eyes. He closed the door, leaned back against it, and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He reached into his jacket and pulled out Sandra's folded resume. He read it again slowly, line by line. The part about refusing to falsify reports. The note about mentoring younger staff even when her own position was unstable. The volunteer work at a local shelter written in tiny letters at the bottom, almost like she was embarrassed to mention it. This is what courage looks like, he murmured to the empty room. He turned the page over and noticed a faint imprint where a phone number had been erased and rewritten. Next to it, an emergency contact. Mrs. Alvarez, neighbor. A small human detail in a world that had turned everyone into numbers and leverage. He picked up his desk phone and called HR. The same assistant who had sent Sandra away answered, her voice polite but tired. This is Keanu Reeves, he said. I'm looking for a candidate named Sandra Bullock. She interviewed or was scheduled to interview earlier this week. There was a long pause. I remember her, the assistant said slowly, but her interview was canceled. Her file was marked not suitable. We were told to remove it from the system. By whom? He asked, though he already knew. A beat of silence. You know the answer to that, sir. Do you have her contact information? He tried. I'm sorry, we're not allowed to share that. And a word of advice. Her voice dropped to a whisper. People who ask too many questions here don't last very long. Please be careful. He hung up, frustration burning like acid in his chest. He tried the number on the resume anyway, disconnected. He tried the neighbor, voicemail full. Each dead line felt like another door closing. That same night at the diner, the small TV above the counter flashed to a business news channel. Lewis grabbed the remote to turn it down, but a familiar face stopped Sandra cold. And today, Dehan Global officially introduced its new CEO, Keanu Reeves, the anchor was saying. A photo from the press conference filled the screen. Keanu in a dark suit, expression serious but humble, microphones pointed at his face. Sandra froze, coffee pot in hand. That guy's the new boss of that giant Korean company, Lewis whistled. He looks more like a musician than a CEO. Sandra stared. He picked up my resume, she said quietly, almost to herself. On the screen, the reporter continued. Reeves, who has a background in logistics and engineering, is expected to lead Dehan's expansion across Asia and Europe. The sudden appointment follows the unexpected death of former CEO Han Jae-woo in a car accident last month. Authorities have ruled out foul play, though some questions remain about. The words blurred as a photo of the wrecked car flashed on the screen. Flames, twisted metal, a headline, From Tragedy to Transition. A chill ran down Sandra's spine. The timing, the secrecy, the way her interview had vanished the same day this man walked into the building like he already belonged to it. Lewis snapped his fingers in front of her. Earth to Sandra, you okay? She blinked and forced herself to move, to pour another cup, to wipe another counter. But inside, something had shifted. The humiliation of the trash bin, the kindness of the security guard, the haunted look she now noticed in Keanu's eyes on the screen, all of it tangled into one heavy knot. Across the city, in his high-rise office, Keanu stood at the window with the crumpled resume in his hand, the TV in his corner muted but showing his own face at the press conference earlier that day. He wasn't watching himself. He was staring at her name. Where did they throw you, Sandra? He whispered. Two people in two different rooms, under two very different lights, both stood with the same question in their hearts. What if the stranger I met for only a moment is the only person who might understand what I'm about to do? And somewhere far below the skyline, and above the flickering diner's neon sign, that unanswered question hung in the air between them, waiting to pull their lives into the same dangerous orbit.